Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. I've just got back to Gatwick after the trip to Holland. Disappointing result, obviously, against AZ Alkmaar. But I thought I'd do a quick video on some of the comments Guglielmo Vicario gave to us, which you may have seen floating around this morning, as well as Ange's press conference, which actually wasn't at, but I've seen the open section quotes. I thought I'd talk a little bit about that ahead of Bournemouth and do a preview to Bournemouth at the weekend, a Premier League game where, I don't know, does it matter now at this point? I mean, Spurs definitely would argue that it does. I'm sure Ange would. But in reality, with a 10-point gap to 8th in the league to where Brighton are right now, which is realistically the last chance of getting into Europe this season. That's only if there are 5 Champions League spots. With 11 games left, I think it's a tall order given the inconsistency of Tottenham. But obviously they need to sort of up their game after that performance last night ahead of their biggest match of the season, the second leg against Alkmaar. So anyway, let's start with Vicario. So it was mainly to do with this incident right at full time where Vicario seemed to be urging the fans, the travelling supporters, quite demonstratively to show a bit more support, I suppose, or sort of up the support coming from the stands, sort of waving his arms to try and gesticulate that he was sort of hoping for more support. And when it didn't really come, which I think is totally fair enough after a performance like that, and given how much Spurs have been great supporters of their team through a very difficult season, and obviously pay their hard-earned money for a trip to the Netherlands, which by the way was not cheap. He sort of seemed to sort of kind of walk off in a huff afterwards, but I think that kind of underlines the passion of the guy, and that was kind of what he was saying in his response when we asked him about it last night. He said, first of all, when he was asked about the criticism that he kind of faced, he had a bit of social media pushback on his reaction, and he said they can do that, i.e. the fans are sort of free to think what they, to express any way they wish towards him and towards the team. He understood that they must be very disappointed after that performance. He can understand that frustration. He reiterated they're going to need the fans. They always need the supporters, and they're going to need them obviously next week. And he's pretty conciliatory in his tone, and I think he seems just a pretty genuine, passionate guy about Tottenham. I don't think he was having a right pop at the fans. I mean, I can see how supporters might be a bit frustrated, given the matter of the performance. Albeit, to be fair, Vicario was very good. He was the only player really in Spurs' lineup who had a good game, and if it weren't for him and the 2 big saves he made from Troy Parrott and in the second half from Poku, who looked very good on the left wing, this tie might be out of sight. So yeah, he's just he's obviously one of the vice captains, or one of the sort of captains sort of leadership group, and it's something you see a lot in modern day football throughout matches. Really, support players, particularly when they go for corners or make big tackles, throwing their arms up in the air, trying to urge the fans to support them. And I think sometimes it works really well, and the supporters really respond to it. But at times I find like it happens from a personal point of view, it happens a bit too frequently. And I'm generally, even though it's on fans to support the team and generate an atmosphere, I think when things aren't going so, and you need to stick by your team, sometimes when performances are sort of consistently not great, it is also on the team to provide something that is deserving of vociferous support, like he was sort of suggesting last night, I suppose, with his actions at the end of the game. So I definitely don't think the supporters are to blame for maybe not being quite as passionate and sort of, as I say, vociferous in their support as maybe Vicario would have liked. But I think it all comes from a good place, nothing malicious from his point of view, and he just wants the team to do well going through this difficult phase into this absolutely crucial part of the season. And he said, he basically said that we're going to show. He said we're going to show the real Spurs next time. I guess particularly in the second leg, which they really do have to. This game is massive, but he very much feels like there's going to be a change about a turnaround in the performance. I mean, you do have to wonder why they put in such a lacklustre display in such a crucial match last night. But the one upside to it is it's only 1-0, it's only half time, and if they go through, which they are definitely capable of doing at home, then no one's going to care about the sort of manner of that defeat. But yeah, that was basically what Vicario said. And then looking at Ange's quotes from his press conference, sort of maybe the standout line was launching a quite passionate defence of Vicario when he was asked about that particular incident. I guess it was one of the main talking points that wasn't really brought up in yesterday's press conference, so it was an obvious follow-up to today's press conference. And he said, he's a passionate guy, as I've just outlined. I think we all know that. And if anyone, I think the quote was, if anyone thinks he's got a vindictive bone in his body, that is Vicario, then they don't know him like I do. And I think from my sort of brief dealings with him in mixed zones, when we get a chance to speak to the players, such as last night, but previously, I think that passion that he has for the club and what willingness to do well comes through. He seems a very committed player, and I don't think anyone's really sort of accusing him of not having that, or I think most fans, they'd be disingenuous if they really thought it was coming from any other place apart from a sort of place of wanting the team to do better and the team and the fans to be unified, but they just feel frustrated because they don't like being dictated to, understandably so, after such a poor performance. On to other points that Ange made. He said it was too early to tell about Solanke. He said it was knee to the backside effectively, and hopefully he can recover quickly. Whether that's in time to play against his old team Bournemouth remains to be seen. He was asked about Ben Davis. He's obviously been missing last few games. He said he wasn't quite sure. He's training at the moment. He's definitely progressed, and they've just got to see how he goes over the next 48 hours to see if he can be involved. Quite specifically about Van der Ven and Romero, who obviously were on the bench again at Alkmaar but didn't play a minute or a second. They were left on the bench. He explained that the logic behind the decision not to play them. And he said he made his mind up as soon as the night before, actually, as soon as he saw the pitch, which I know he's copped a bit of flack for sort of talking about the state of the pitch from Les Ferdinand and from fans. And I guess, even myself, I feel like when you have a performance like that off the back of a difficult season, making any kind of excuses regarding playing surfaces never go down particularly well. But I would also put it down to Ange's general honesty, that he calls it as he sees it, and if he feels like that was a part of it, a part of the reason behind the performance last night, then he's going to say it. I just don't feel like it's something that the fans are going to particularly accept as a reason for that performance. But anyway, he said, looking at the state of the pitch, he just didn't feel it was the right kind of surface to start these two crucial players who've been injured for such a long time. Remember, Christian Romero has been out since December the 8th. That quad problem, that's 3 months. Van der Ven has basically been out the whole same amount of time, barring that first 45 minutes against Elfsborg on January 30th, I think it was. So essentially the same. I mean, 5 weeks since he last played, but really it's basically 3 months as well. And as Postecoglou has reiterated throughout this time where they've been absent, we've been constantly asking questions about them. His main goal is to make sure when they're back they stay fit and they don't get injured again. So I don't think it's understandable, I suppose, that he wasn't going to risk him on a pitch that he didn't feel was the best. Looking ahead to reflecting back on the Alkmaar game, once again he didn't sugarcoat it. He said that it was a poor performance. Sort of, I guess, understands the criticism that have come their way from all of us because of a performance like that. Merits criticism. We're not cheerleaders here. If they don't play well, we sort of, like Ange would, we call it as we see it, and that was a really poor display. And as a result, he is aware that this weekend against Bournemouth, even if the game, to be honest, doesn't look like it matters really whether they win or lose, he feels it very much does matter that they have a good performance and a good result to sort of get them back on track and put them in a good position ahead of the, or into a positive mindset, I suppose, ahead of the second leg. What else did he say? Yeah, he was talking a bit about the form this season. There's obviously massive inconsistency they've shown all season. Injuries have been a huge part of the reason behind that, but I do think also Postecoglou has to take some responsibility, obviously, in the way his team's performed, even if they've been stretched. And he said the gap basically between when they've been good and when they've been bad has been way too big this season. That's a fair comment. I mean, he still feels that's something he can rectify, and feels the team need to rectify it. He doesn't. He was sort of questioned about whether how much clarity the players had over the game plan, and he pushed back on that massively. Said they definitely have sort of supreme clarity, or very just definite clarity over the game plan. If anything, he said it might even be too transparent how much they're aware of the game plan, but it takes, I guess, a certain kind of approach to sort of pull it off, which is maybe one of the criticisms of that approach when it doesn't work as it hasn't done on a number of occasions this season, and that's probably, like I say, a legitimate criticism of Ange's approach generally. So yeah, onto the game itself against Bournemouth at the weekend. I mean, another tricky fixture. I mean, every fixture looks tricky at the moment with Spurs, and you just never know what you're really going to get. They are, the ultimate box of chocolates kind of team this season. 18 defeats, but they've also had some big highs. Obviously beating both Manchester clubs multiple times this season. I mean, Bournemouth, they the last time they played them was the kind of towards the beginning of this winter of discontent, this injury hit winter that we've gone through. It was a 1-0 defeat, and it was quite a bleak game, to be honest. It was a poor performance, and we've seen far too many of those. We saw it last night at Alkmaar, but they didn't really have a lot in that game, Spurs, from an attacking perspective, and they conceded a very simple set-piece goal with, was it Dean Huijsen, the young Spanish defender, heading in at the far post, who looks a really good player. I've seen a lot of links with him regarding Tottenham this summer. I believe he's got a release clause, or it's widely reported he's got a £50 million release clause, but you imagine a lot of clubs would be all over him. To be fair, he looks a really good player, and they've got a lot of good players, Bournemouth. I feel like they've progressed massively, Bournemouth. It's obvious compared to last season when Spurs won relatively comfortably in both games. I mean, if you remember I think it might have been, was it Ange's third game in charge or close to it, a Premier League game when they won 2-0 at Bournemouth, when Maddison was getting a bit of stick from the Bournemouth fans. But it was a relatively comfortable win. And then the second game, they won 3-1. I think it might have been during that period when they kept conceding early but turned it around. And I seem to remember a lovely counter-attacking goal where Johnson fires it in first time for Richarlison to make it 3-1. One of the games where Richarlison did well for Postecoglou, and I still maintain that he's been a big miss when he's been injured under Postecoglou, because he's performed well for him. He didn't perform particularly well under Conte, but he's been good under Postecoglou when he's been fit, but obviously hasn't been fit anywhere near enough. But Bournemouth, Iriola is someone who's just developing Bournemouth all the time. He's got them into a position of 7th. They're still pushing for that Champions League spot. Whether they can sort of sustain it throughout the rest of the season remains to be seen, but they definitely have the capacity to go and win at Spurs. I mean, Bournemouth have got a good history of winning at Spurs under previous managers. I remember winning, was it 3-2 a couple of years ago? And Spurs will be very wary of them. I mean, Iriola is obviously one of the names that have been mentioned. If Tottenham to make a change at some point with the manager, he's an obvious candidate. My understanding is that he's well sort of admired within Spurs hierarchy. Not to sort of talk about, I suppose, possible successors to Postecoglou while he's still in a job. They have a manager, and that still remains the plan going forward. But he's obviously doing a really, really good job there. He's developed a lot of good young players. Some really smart recruitment from Bournemouth's perspective of late. The likes of Milos Kerkez, who I wouldn't be surprised if he moved to somewhere like Liverpool in the summer. Is an excellent left back. But it's not just from sort of maybe more kind of obscure signings from abroad. It's players like Antoine Semenyo, who I think they signed from Bristol City, and Iriola's developed him massively into an excellent player now out wide. The way he's taking on Justin Kluivert. But it's not just those players. It's players that have been at the club for a while. Lewis Cook has really kicked on under Iriola. He's a player that I remember interviewing when he was at Leeds, when I used to cover the Football League. He's a really good player, but he's been struggled with a lot of injuries. I think he might have had a couple of ACLs. But he's now sort of developed into a very, very good holding midfielder. And that's what Bournemouth are. They're just full of good, promising, either really solid Premier League players like Cook now, or younger players who look like they've got a really bright future in the game. And they've had their own injuries to deal with, but they're starting to get some players back. Evan Nilsson's back fit now, and he's a key player for them up front, who seems to have picked up the mantle from Solanke, not from a sort of goal-scoring point of view. He hasn't scored as many as he probably would have liked, and definitely not as many as Solanke has, but he's an effective presser up front, and they're just a really well-organised outfit who are sort of the standard bearers for the kind of mid-ranking Premier League sides who've really improved this season. Your Fulhams, your Bournemouths, your Brightons, all pushing for Europe, and maybe even one of them might sneak into the Champions League, which has underlined how difficult the Premier League has been this season. Liverpool have been far away the best team, but after that some of the other sides have maybe dropped off a little bit, like your Arsenals, your Man Cities. But what's been notable this season is the strength and depth of those mid-ranking sides, and meaning that no team can take results for granted apart from maybe perhaps Liverpool. And the fact that the three promoted teams are cut adrift at the bottom, it shows you the depth and quality. And it means that a team like Spurs, similar to Man United, if they're going through a difficult season, through injuries, through inconsistency, not quite up to speed, they will get punished, and they have done time and time again. And it could definitely happen again at the weekend if Bournemouth are on it and Spurs aren't. Obviously the last time they played each other, I mentioned that 1-0 defeat. One of the sort of standout moments from that game was the climax at the end at full time, where the fans seemed to sort of have a bit of a pop at Ange Postecoglou, and it was kind of the only time really we've really seen it, I think, from the stands. It's generally been directed towards the ownership when they've been frustrated, but that one was specifically with Ange Postecoglou. But I don't think it was so much for the poor performance, as poor as it was on the day. It was more, I believe, when he didn't go over. Or they seem to think that he didn't go over to them as much as near as they wanted to sort of applaud them for their support, and they were frustrated by that. And I seem to remember Jed Spence racing over to sort of act as almost like to calm things down, act as peacemaker. And he's actually someone we spoke to ahead of for sort of Sunday's newspaper, so I might do a video on him as well, where he talks a bit about that actually. It's amazing thinking back now that Spence was an unused sub for that game. Archie Gray started at left back, which shows you the amazing journey that Spence has been on since. Now that he's Premier League nominee for Player of the Month, in the England reckoning. It's crazy, really, thinking that he wasn't starting that game. But I guess it shows you how quickly football can change in the space of a few months. On to the starting lineup. Vicario obviously in goal. I think Porro comes back in at right back. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if he does start Spence, and obviously if he starts Romero and Van de Ven, I wouldn't be surprised if he started both of them. Obviously Danzo is there, but I wonder if ahead of their massive game on Thursday, perhaps he brings in both of them and gives them sort of half. I don't know. It's a hard one at centre back. It's suddenly options, but you feel like he's got to play them soon, and maybe that will be the game that he gives both of them a chance. So I wouldn't be surprised if they both started, and so therefore I wouldn't be surprised if Udogie started left back and Spence was on the bench, because he might go back to that old sort of trusted back four. We'll see. Probably Bentancur, but obviously he's suspended for Thursday, so I wonder if he might look at Basuma if he brings him back into the fold. Obviously Basuma's been completely out of the picture recently, or if he starts with maybe Gray at holding midfield, or we keep wondering when it's going to happen, or Bergvall. It seems like Spurs would be wise at this point to use this particular game, even though I'm kind of being slightly hypocritical, because I felt like they took their eye off the ball against City with their team selection when they could have focused on the league. But now that after that defeat, it feels like the league has gone, so they may as well use this as preparation for their massive game against Alkmaar in the second leg. So I wonder what they'll do in that holding midfield position. We'll see. That's a tough one. I'm not sure. not sure on that one. I still think it'll be Maddison. I wouldn't be surprised if Sarr comes back in for a bit more energy and legs in midfield after that performance last night. I mean, up front, it depends. Obviously, if Solanke's not fit, presuming he won't make it, and we'll see. I don't know. I wonder if Dane Scarlett starts, because Tell is really struggling at the moment at centre forward. That was what I would be pushing to do. I think start Scarlett really, because Tell hasn't really struggled to make an impact. But it depends if Postecoglou sticks with him, really sticks to his Tell. And then there's sort of cases to be made in the wide positions. Johnson didn't really pull up any trees against Alkmaar, nor did Son. So does Odebear come in for a start? I mean, there are big question marks, and as you can tell, I'm just not sure really at this stage. Let me know your thoughts. I would be really intrigued to see what you think would be the right way to play it for this Bournemouth game, and how much it really should be used as preparation for Alkmaar, or whether that's the wrong way to play it. And maybe there is still something to play for in the league. Let's see. Anyway, cheers guys. Good to speak to you again. And like I say, I might do something on Spence. We'll see. Cheers guys.